today's topic that we wanted to cover is on integrations. We're going to talk about all sorts of integrations to Lead Docket, but again, like we always say this every time, is these best webinars or free help is when you guys bring questions. So feel free to drop a question on the Q&A box. We can even like let you speak if you want. Then we can kind of share your problems, even share your screen if that's the case, show your Lead Docket, see the issue that's happening, and let's try to solve some stuff on this call. These are the best ones when we're actually solving problems here. So if you're in front of your Lead Docket right now, you can pull it up and think about the issues that you may be having, or some of the questions or things that you wish you could do, and bring them on, right? We always say this, those are the best ones. So without further ado, here is Shadae.
Hello, are we already started?
Yes, we already
Okay.
started. There's some people in here. We're chit-chatting. Eydi discovered Reese's peanut butter Easter eggs, which was a big sensation. So we mentioned that already. And we're giving you a couple more minutes. And Shade, all I did was mention that we're open for questions and to change our topic at any time. So I know we're going to talk about integrations today, but we're happy to digress, as you will know. We're happy to go into directions that you may have or any questions that you may have. Now, I'm promising I'm gonna shut up a little bit more. If there's silence, I have to fill in the silence. So
he says it every time. Every time. It doesn't happen.
I'm gonna try.
I hope not, because then it's just the sound of my voice that they'll have to deal with for an hour.
I know I don't like when I'm talking by myself either. This is not fun. So I'm
All
here.
right, well,
I'll talk.
cool. Well, we did have a couple more people join, so I'm going to reiterate what Ivan has already said, which is that this is intended to be free help session, open Q&A. So if there is topics, questions you guys have that are not in line with our integrations, absolutely throw them in the chat, throw them in our question box, and we'll digress. We'll move into that other topics. Always happy to do so. And the second asterisk that I want to put on today is that this is a really advanced topic. So there are integrations in Lead Docket that are really easy and straightforward for your internal team to set up. And there are some that are kind of a little intermediate. And then there are some really advanced principles. So if any of this is going over your head, if any of it seems confusing, if you have a specific integration you want to reach into or look into, reach out to us. I think it's always appropriate. You can unmute here, of course, and have that conversation now, or you can reach out to us and we can take that question offline for something that's more specific. So whichever you're more comfortable with, but this is definitely advanced stuff. So it's perfectly normal to not feel comfortable with it from a one single session webinar. So I guess without further ado, we'll get started. So when we talk about integrations in Lead Docket, I like to break it down. We like to break it down into three categories. One is going to be your native built-in integrations. So Lead Docket went out and they have a partnership pre-made with another company. Partnership might be the wrong word, but they have a existing integration that you just have to plug in a API key or a code or a customer ID, and it's already decided what it's going to do, what that integration is going to do. So that's one type. Our second type is opportunity integrations. This is by far the most common one that you're going to use. This is where you want potential leads, potential clients from lead generation sources or your web chat or your answering service to drop into our opportunities box. So that's number two. And number three is a custom integration. And this is where you're going to use more of the advanced properties in Lead Docket to create something or build a workflow that does not exist yet. And Lead Docket does have what's called an open API. So we have access to make those changes and build those types of integrations depending on what you're looking to do. So I'm going to share my screen so we can put some visuals to this. Well, actually, give me a second. Make sure I got the right thing pulled up first. Just got done with a training, so rushing. Okay, so there we go. Now I'm going to share my screen and we're looking at Lead Docket. So let's go ahead and take a look at the native integrations because, like I said, these are pre-made. We already know what they're going to do. All we need to do is turn them on. And so how can you find what's a native integration? How do I know what is already built out for Lead Docket? Not including FileVine or your case management system. This is going to be for things that you want to work with inside of FileVine. So, or excuse me, Lead Docket. So we're going to go into Manage over on our left-hand side. We're going to skip all the way down to Settings. And then you're going to see that there's an Integrations tab along the top banner here. So anything that's on this page, this is something that we call would be a native built-in integration. So depending on what type, let's take a look at our mailing list systems. You can see we have two types. So MailChimp and Infusionsoft, which has actually been rebranded to a different name. I can't remember what it is right now, though.
Yeah.
Something like Lead or Leaf. I don't remember. But we'll just in case Infusionsoft doesn't sound familiar, it may still be yours. I would look into that, and we'll touch on that. But you just select which one you're looking for, and it's going to tell you exactly what you need. So in your MailChimp account, all you would need would be your mailing list key. You can have one or two. And then for your Infusionsoft, it looks the same. We've actually connected to an Infusionsoft account before. So you can see we already have some keys in here from a past integration that we did. So how do you know where to find this stuff inside of MailChimp or inside of Infusionsoft? That is where you have to go into those accounts to grab the keys. And there is a really easy thing for these built-in integrations that you guys can do to see how to set it up. Is you can go to the Lead Docket support page. You can type in that integration you're looking for. And more often than not, there's going to be an article that's going to walk you through how to make that connection. Because these are pre-made, these are built in. It's going to walk you through where to go inside that other service to make that connection. So that is going to...
Can I chime in real quick, Shadae?
Yes.
Those support articles are also going to be where you're going to understand what does that connection do, right?
Yes.
So, because each one of these connections, Shadae mentioned in the beginning, they're preset. They do a certain thing. They're preset, like a system preset. You have some control over it, but they are, already preset for you, and you want to understand what does a MailChimp integration do, or what are the Calendly integration do, what the CallRail integration do, and that's probably the articles are going to be your best bet, right? I think that's the best place to find that.
That's exactly it. And when you get done with your actual connection, if you get to the bottom, you're going to see the related articles, or it's going to kind of prompt you into that. So here it can say for information on how to put leads in mailing lists, click here. And it's going to give you more information on what that integration does, exactly like Ivan just said.
Yeah. And it may not be as straightforward now that I'm thinking. I think the help articles are not as clear on what it does. I've set up a couple of these where it was a lot of like wrap your head around what is it actually doing, and so it may not be as straightforward as you think, but those are powerful integrations. I like them actually. So
yes. Let's go back to Lead Docket. And then we're going to have our electronic system, so our signature system. So most often you're going to be connected with VineSign, which is FileVine's signature service. But we can also integrate with DocuSign. So you may have DocuSign, and you're going to see it doesn't prompt you for anything. I'm not going to hit save because we need to keep our VineSign connection there. But when you hit save, it's going to prompt you just to sign into your DocuSign account. So I think that one's probably the most straightforward one on this whole list. Your VineSign one, this is not something you'll do yourself. This is something that should already be done for you or done by FileVine. So you'd have to reach out to them. But DocuSign is just going to prompt you to log into your account. CallRail, if for those of you guys that use CallRail or call tracking metrics, both of these are going to be your different ways to connect call services. And you can actually do both. So if you are a firm out there who is using both services, maybe for different reasons, you can connect both of these. But CallRail and call tracking metrics are here separately for you. And then just like with the MailChimp, the best recommendation that we have is to go to the support page. Look up that service. And you're going to see the support articles that walk you through what that means. So there's a couple different options here. Integrating call tracking metrics will walk you through how to find the information you need in your call tracking metrics account so that you can grab those access keys and put them into Lead Docket, plug and play them. It's also going to give you, just like we said, kind of the best straightforward information on what that integration is doing, because these are pre-made. We have, like Ivan mentioned, we can customize them a tiny bit, but for the most part, they were made with a very specific purpose in mind. And I think that is a great segue into kind of what we wanted to talk about with this integration. Oh, I skipped one. Calendly, before I go into that. That way, Calendly is a recent addition last year, which is a calendar scheduling software. And this one's actually really cool because you can connect your Calendly account and then you can build it into your messages so that you can send a message to a client that just says, hey, feel free to schedule an appointment with us here. They can click in, they can schedule an appointment, it will go onto your calendar, and then Lead Docket's also going to update to say that that appointment has been scheduled. So that's a fun one if you have not worked with Calendly before. And that's a little bit of information on what it does. We can also come over to the Lead Docket support channel, and we can put Calendly. And here we go, integrating with Calendly. So all of these systems that you see here are going to have a support article for you to reference because they're built into Lead Docket. But kind of where I was going with that was, this is a great segue, and we've talked about that they do something specific. And when you're looking at integrations, kind of what we want everybody to get their mind around is, the point is, what do you want it to do? What's your goal? Integrating really just means that the two programs can communicate, whether it's one way or two way. They can communicate in some way. And the ultimate goal is we want to know, what do you want to communicate? And these integrations have been built with that in mind already. They've heard people talk about what they want from these platforms, so they already have it ready for you. Another one is we want to receive leads from people. We want to receive potential clients, which is going to be our opportunity integrations. But then when we kind of get past this, if these programs are not what you're looking for, if it's not just receiving leads, if there's some sort of communication with another software that you need, that's where we kind of get into our native, or not, excuse me, our custom integration. So before I move on to opportunity integrations, I feel like, is there anything else we should talk about with these built-in ones?
I wish we could do a little poll to see who's using them. I try to do it here, but I can't. I don't know if we have access. I wish you could kind of have, I don't know if people can like raise hands or comment or anything like that. If you're using these integrations or not. The ones that we most often see used, obviously, are call rail and call tracking metrics. I think those are the ones that we see a lot of the time. Electronic signature system also, obviously, VineSign is an obvious one, but I wonder if you guys are using, if anybody here is using the Calendly or the email one. Nobody, no takers, no questions.
Yeah.
No comments, I guess.
Or anybody using it and it's not doing something that you thought it would do.
Yeah, which is another, there are some little things here, and there are some quirks of those integrations as well.
We
Okay.
did get someone who's not using those services.
Yeah. Definitely worth looking into it. I like the MailChimp one. The MailChimp doesn't hurt to create a nice database of your clients. So the MailChimp is a very simple one, cheap one to make, and it just syncs your client's data into an external system.
The other nice thing about knowing that this list is here is these are really accessible integrations to improve your workflow. So if you're kind of in Lead Docket and you're like, well, what's something I could be doing better? This page right here is a perfect example of more advanced things that your team could improve your workflow with, which is more tracking, like you said, mail listing services. Maybe the scheduling is going to be there for you. So these are very accessible means of improving your workflow.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning these are available for everybody. This is like, there's no charge nor anything like that. This is available for you in Lead Docket right now. So you should be taking advantage of it.
All right, so this next one's going to be about your opportunity integration. So I keep saying that word over and over and over again, and just to make sure to nail it, hammer it home, that's the people who are going to pop up in this box. So this could be your web chats, your answering services, your web forms. It could be a website that you guys use like FindLaw or any Thomson Reuters products. A Walker advertising is a huge one. So anything that's sending you guys potential clients, we want that information to come into Lead Docket automatically for you when it's possible. Most systems have the ability to do so. You will occasionally run across a company who does not have the software set up for that. And we have some workarounds. So if you are being told no from your company that you're working with, I actually do urge you to reach out to us because we can build it out custom to a certain extent in some cases. But most of them are going to be able to follow exactly this blueprint that we're about to go over. So how do we get people to put these potential clients into this box? And that is going to be with another integrations tab we have in Lead Docket. So this time, when you hit manage, we're going to stop right at this integrations tab. And when you click it, it's going to take you to a long list or an empty list if you have none set up yet of all of your opportunities sources. So we obviously have a lot in here because we are not a real firm. So we're in here constantly testing and working on these platforms. But more often than not, you're going to have maybe 1 to 5 or so in here. You may have none if you haven't started yet. And it's time to create it from scratch. So this is going to be more from the ground up. Right in the top right-hand corner, you have an Add New button, which I think is the obvious starting spot. And you're going to have some options. So is it a web form? Is it a web chat? Is it an answering service? Lead generation service is across the board. So it's always safe to just go ahead and put lead generation service when you're adding these. But if you do know the specific one, you may want to add that specific misnomer there. Opportunity name. So let's go ahead and say that we are working with a company called Fake Answering Service. All you need to do is name it. And then you could go ahead and add email addresses and notes here. I'm going to circle back to that. Name it and hit save because there you go. It's going to be right there for you again. So I've created an opportunity. I've created an opportunity source. This is pre-made for you. So now you just need to get the information over to your company and then make sure that what they're sending in can be read by Lead Docket. So again, any of this that goes over your head, that's perfectly fine. Absolutely feel free to always reach out to us for these. But I do want to make sure that you guys feel comfortable with what it looks like and how to navigate it and make edits if you needed to maybe an existing integration. We oftentimes come across firms who they've got people who are sending them potential clients and they're just copy and pasting data from a big summary box into the first name field, into the last name field, into the email field. And you do not need to be doing that. You can set it up so that Lead Docket can read that information that's coming from the firm. You just need to know where to go. And where do you go is exactly where we're at right now. So I've created this opportunity source called Fake Answering Service. And if I scroll all the way down to the bottom, I'm going to see my form fields. So this is the data that Lead Docket knows how to read. And that's the best way I can put it. It's going to say, okay, into your first name field, we're going to look for the word first. And so when this other service sends you over data, they can dictate a field first, and then the data that should follow that should go into the first name field. So we should take a look at what that actually looks like. Let's pull up an example. Okay, 1 second here. I should have
Actually a very good way to put it, Shadae. I know we have a question about LSAs, but I think let's sketch that in a minute there, Derek. So let's see. After Shadae kind of wraps this part up, we'll go back to Google LSAs because that's it's a question that we get often.
Yeah, for sure. So I mentioned that we're going to pull up an example. So when I'm talking about what a third-party source is sending, what data is being sent into Lead Docket, so Lead Docket can read it, you can click on an opportunity and scroll down, and anything that you see is obviously autofilling. That's reading correctly. But how do I know what's being sent through so I can tell Lead Docket how to read it? You can scroll all the way down to the bottom, and more often than not, you're going to see a payload of information here. And these are our fields. So if it says first, no space name, that is how I'm reading my first name. last no space name is how I'm reading my last name. So this information here will go into wherever you have dictated first name should go. Same thing for last name, for your address 1, for your state, for your phone number. So this is how you're going to know what they're sending to you. And now we need to update Lead Docket to say, okay, I'm looking for that first name. I'm looking for that last name. I'm looking for this giant dump of information underneath summary. So this is exactly how you're going to be able to find that information. Now, the firm or the company may also just be able to tell you, but back and forth communication will get you started. You're always going to need to check here truly to know what the actual field names are. So let's go back here where I mentioned, here's my form fields. I'm going to hit edit because this is going into my first name field. We're looking for the data called first. And I don't have any field name here that's being called first. It's first name. So I'm going to change it to say first name, save. And then now this is saying Lead Docket's going to look for first name in your payload and put it into the first name field. And I would do that for every single field that I wanted to come through. So last name, phone, email, summary. Now let's go ahead and take another look because there's also something coming through that we don't even have in there, lead ID. So that's probably a custom field. It may be built in. You're unlikely to receive lead ID. This is from a test, but you might have something else like infinite date, for example, that's being passed through. And I want to collect that. I don't want my team to be copy pasting that. So how we can add a field that you don't see here is in this add form field box down below. You can select, this is searching your lead docket fields. So as long as it's in lead docket, let's type in incident date, accept data, which means are we receiving that data? Yes. And then same exact thing, I can go, okay, well, what are they sending that to us as? And let's go ahead and say they're actually sending it to us date of loss. Thanks. So now Lead Docket's going to search for date of loss in that payload, and it's going to put it into the incident date field. And the last thing that I would show, at least for this part, is going to be when you added it. And let's go ahead and do a different one. We'll do injury information. No, is client injured? And accept data, yes or no. So no, you'll notice says use a preset value. More often than not, the times you're going to use that are actually for times where you know where the case type is coming from. If this is a specific case type campaign, maybe you want it to always come in as motor vehicle accident. Or maybe you want these to always be assigned to somebody, the same person. So assigned to the same intake role. No, let's always assign it to Ivan. So that's another thing that you can do. It's not always having to read information that's being passed through. Sometimes you can just say, always assume this information. You can change it down the road. But that way, when it gets into Lead Docket, it just is already assuming certain pieces of information. All right, and then I think we'll probably wrap up this whole little section before we move on to the Google essays, right? Don't you think?
Yeah, I think you're in a... Yeah, the Google LSA is a tricky one, Derek. That's one question that we got here. But I think what you covered so far, Shadae, kind of explains a little bit of the limitation with the Google LSAs. And the main limitation here, Derek, is that Google, specifically on the LSA side, they can't push information to Lead Docket with the webhook, is what this is called, right? They send you an email. Google LSAs will send you an email to say, hey, you got a new lead. Here's the name of the lead and the information on the lead in there from that email. So Google doesn't have the ability to configure that push into the system at this point, as far as I know. Now, we have created a couple of ways around it. I've created so what we can do is you can use a middle point in there. And I think, Shadae, we'll get into the more advanced I guess do you have more to cover there before we go into the advanced ones?
The only thing I would add here is obviously we've made it, but it's just us. So how do we actually get the information from the company? Yeah. The company needs to send it to us, but we have to give them something. So this is going to help in this next conversation too. But what you're looking to give them is called an endpoint. It's where they're posting the data to. They're pushing data to us. So we need to provide them with that endpoint. And where you guys are going to get that, it's going to be next to your system that you set up. So I'm going to go to fake answering service. You're going to click on this definitions page. And honestly, the best thing that you can do if you're doing this by yourself is to just copy this URL at the top and provide this to that company. They're going to be able to read this. These are post instructions. They're going to be able to say, okay, I'm going to use this URL. Here's all my field names. That way that their team can do this part of the work and they're already aware of what they're looking at. So if you're doing this by yourself, send them the URL at the top and they should be able to take it from there. You may have a little bit of back and forth to fix the field names, but that is going to get you to where you need to get at least of receiving data from that company. That would be the last thing I'd say there on the opportunity integrations.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, Derek, does that make sense? On the Google can't post anything to that endpoint URL. So now maybe we kind of go a little bit into the solution for LSAs. I don't know if I would recommend this as well. I've tried it 2 different ways. You can use a system like Zapier, for example, as a middleman, like as a middleman in this process. And this is true for all advanced integrations, right? So this Shadae may touch on that a little bit more, but let's say you do this, you set up a Zapier account. If you're not familiar with Zapier is an automation tool. It's kind of a code-free automation tool. And the Zapier will then receive the email from your local service heads, parse that email. There's something called an email parser in Zapier. So if the email always comes the same way, it can identify this is the name, this is the client phone number, this is the client message. It removes or parse through that email, so it removes the data, and then it pushes into Lead Docket, into an integration. So it's possible. You just have to add a middleman step, like in the middle there, that receives the email from local service ads and then posts it into Lead Docket using this exact same system. I hope this makes sense. I hope this makes sense to you.
The other thing I would add there too is because you know what Ivan's referencing is when you have some sort of message or submission or area where people are typing on those Google service ads, LSAs. But if the goal here is just to track LSAs, not necessarily capture people entering information, that is best handled with a call tracking service. So just making sure that we're using the right terminology. If you're really just trying to figure out, okay, well, did this person call or did this person click on the Google LSA or how did they get there? There is other tracking we can do, like call tracking or click tracking. That's going to show you where that person came from. But yes, if it's about them actually entering information or going back and forth with you and getting that submission into Lead Docket, that's the exact tricky conversation that Ivan was just answering.
And I will just reply to another message that Trisha posted in here about LSAs. And LSAs, Trisha, what we are talking about there is not Google search or Google pay-per-click like Google Ads. Those will be slightly different. We're talking about the local service ads, which is that box that you get at the top when you search for like attorney near me. You get that box at the top that shows you the attorneys, and usually there's an option to message and there's an option to call. So that's where Shadae was saying using the call tracking metrics or GoRail to track that call is your best bet, Derek, for local service ads calls. I guess that didn't pop up. No, you don't have local service ads in that area. Local service ads, that's the Google My Business. Try to type attorney near me. Or,
I didn't want to call anybody out.
yeah, that's local service ads right there. See how it says Google screen at the very top? Those are the local service ads.
All right, there we go.
Yeah, that's what it is. I mean, that's fine.
Yeah,
that's local service ads right at the top. You usually see like that's a phone number that you can click and call them, or you may see like a message button that you can send them a message. And that's, I think, what Derek was asking. The call is better tracked on call metrics, and then the message is where it gets a little bit tricky, but you can do that on that. So awesome. We answered that question. I'll mark it here. All right. So that's it, Tricia. That's the LSA. Now,
For your question on Ruby reception, that's an excellent question because I have worked with Ruby reception before. At least at the time I worked with them, they were not able to set up that direct integration into Lead Docket. But what companies like that can do, and Ruby reception is one of them, is that they are willing to use what's called a reception form inside of Lead Docket. It's a type of integration. It's intended typically for internal usage, but it can be a really good option for companies who are a third-party reception company who need to get that data to you. So you actually set that up in the exact same place as your integrations. And then when you're add new, instead of a lead generation service, it's a reception form. And then just like we did with the last one, we go down to our form fields, and anything that you guys want them to answer, you would just add here. So case type, yes, save, incident date, yes, save. And then instead of sending them a definitions page, oops, I actually didn't need to exit. It's going to be this URL that they can use. And this URL is going to take them to this page where now whenever they take a call for you guys, they can submit it physically in an opportunity. So things may have changed. They may be able to do that direct integration now. I would absolutely check with them. They are familiar with Lead Docket, but this is an option for those companies that are willing to do a reception page in place of a automatic API connection.
perfect.
I've been like dropping all my miscellaneous Zoom boxes everywhere, so I lost the Q&A, but are we?
No, we're good. I think we answered the Ruby receptionist question. That's a very good one. Awesome.
Right.
Okay,
All
okay.
right. So we've got the rest of the time to talk about custom integrations,
Yeah.
which I would like to emphasize to everybody that we actually have another call in the future, which is going to be Fun with Zapier, where we're going to really dive into some actual fun things you can do with the API. This call is not for us to dive deep into what that looks like, but it's just to give an introduction into how you can kind of see what's going to be available. So that's kind of the purpose of today. And then if you have more in-depth questions, absolutely feel free to chime in, or you can schedule, a session with us. But we mentioned that we have an open API in Lead Docket, just like in FileVine. You can do a lot of things in Lead Docket if you use outside tools or you have the tools to access it. So, trying to make sure I start from the right spot.
Yeah.
There's going to be two things you're looking at here. One is from Lead Docket to another system, so outgoing communication. I want to send something from Lead Docket to elsewhere. And then two is I want to receive information from elsewhere into Lead Docket. And then oftentimes in a good integration, there's going to be both. It's going to be back and forth, back and forth. Good is the wrong word. Complex. It's going to be back and forth. You can have plenty of good integrations that it's just a one-way push. But there could be back and forth where you may have to use both of those. And they are set up differently. So that is why I wanted to make a distinction between those. So one, outgoing. I want Lead Docket information to push out to another surface. That is going to be using a process called webhooks, or a setting called webhooks inside of Lead Docket. So you may have seen that word either in the help support, or you've probably seen it today because that was on our integrations page. You do have to turn it on first. So you go down to settings, integrations, and enable it. And that's going to pop up this webhooks rules button for you. We've got a lot of stuff in here. So let's take a look at these real quick. I'm actually going to pause my screen for a second and come right back, because I just needed to change something real quick. There we go. So we're on this page. this is where you can control when and what you want to push out of Lead Docket. So it's called a webhook. So you're pushing something out of Lead Docket based on an action. All of our webhooks are lead-based, lead action-based. So it's something that's going to happen on, not lead necessarily, but action, single action-based. Something that's going to happen when a specific action takes place inside of Lead Docket. So if I click this Add New button in the corner, you're going to see I'm going to have the option to label it. And then I'm going to filter down what I want to send out and then what I want to trigger that action. So I'm going to use a very specific instance here. When I create a lead, I want to push that information into a Google Sheet. So that's going to be pretty straightforward. Let's go ahead and take a look at our triggers. And there's going to be a lead created option. And then let's say I only want to send my Portuguese clients. And down here in the creation rules, you can even further filter it. So I want it to only be when I create a lead into Chase for my auto cases, for example. So that's just an example of how you can narrow it down. Now, if you are sending something like this out external, you're gonna need a third-party service. So you're gonna see this webhook URL. Now, where have we heard this before? We're doing webhooks right now. And when we've given an opportunity integration, when we're setting that up, we're giving them a URL. They're posting that information to a URL for us. And now we need a dedicated place to post our information to. To do that, you're more often going to need a program like Zapier. Zapier is going to be an easy, navigatable way for you to connect different services together because it's more user-friendly and it's made for automation. So you can do this with other programs, but Zapier is one of our go-tos for Lead Docket because of those reasons. It's very easy to navigate for people. It's user-friendly. It can be more cost-effective for people. You can use other services, like I said, like even Work Auto in some cases, but Zapier is going to be a little bit more accessible. And Zapier is going to be a place where you can get an endpoint, a URL, and paste that here so that you can push this data out. So this is, again, intended to be very introductory, not anything in depth. But in order to send data, you need to set up a webhook, and you have to have a place for you to send that information to, which is that endpoint, that webhook URL. Anything that you want to add before I talk about receiving data into Lead Docket?
I think you covered it.
Okay.
Please.
So how do we use this now with receiving information in Lead Docket? You might not do them at the same time, but you might want to have a back and forth going. So if we're pushing data into a Google Sheet, what about if I update that Google Sheet? Do I want it to update Lead Docket again? I'm using this as an example. I do not necessarily consider this to be best practices. This is a case-by-case basis, so please don't use this specific example to go run and say that's what you need to start doing. But that's an example. Let's say when I update that sheet, I now want that information to pass back into Lead Docket. So that's coming into Lead Docket now. So just like when we push out, we need to have a landing zone, a URL to send that data to. We need to have a URL, a landing point to send back into Lead Docket. So those opportunity integrations, we had one that was pre-made and packaged with a bow for us. You didn't have to build anything there. All you had to do was hit Add New, and then the definitions page had everything you need. But when you're receiving any other information into Lead Docket, you're going to have to build it from scratch. And the page I'm about to show you is accessible to you. You can read it. But you're going to need, if you're not a developer or you don't have experience with automations, you're going to need someone to help you guide you through this. So I would recommend reaching out to somebody who works in automations, works in Lead Docket, or works on API to really guide you through this before you just start messing with things. So I'm going to show you the page. And the reason is so that you can get an idea of what actions can be done in Lead Docket. So how you get there is when you go down to your settings, you're going to see this API down at the bottom, and you can hit Explore. And this is a list of all of the actions that can be updated in the background via those pushes. So if you're sitting here wondering, oh, well, could I post a document via API to a lead? So how would I know how to do that? there's a lead section on this page. And here is a list of all of the actions that you can do to a lead inside of Lead Docket. So once again, I recommend using this page as a simple guide for, can this thing that I want to do even happen? Is it even possible? But to really read this and understand this, you are going to need to reach out to somebody who has experience with using pages like this. So I'm not going to go over how to test it. I'm not going to go over how to build it, but I am showing you that it is using these endpoints here, these little things that attach at the end, the append of a URL, to then send information back from another source into Lead Docket. So you can see that there's a lot of options here, which means that we have a lot of possibilities for things that you can do in a custom built integration with Lead Docket. It looked like you had a
That was
jump
a
in.
good one. No, I think that's really good that people understand this exists, and this is like the back end of Lead Docket, which can get a little technical, but it's good for you guys as a user to know that this is what the, you know, your developer or the company that you're working with is going to be looking at. Now, there's a question that came in about webhooks out, Shadae, that you were mentioning about the Google Sheets option, right? If you want to put a lead into a Google Sheets, asking can the same be accomplished using Microsoft Excel in the Office 365? And the answer is yes. You can definitely put leads out of Lead Docket into Microsoft Office 365, as long as what Shadae was mentioning is using Zapier again as a middleman kind of option in there. So you can, the idea is that Lead Docket will push out the data to Zapier at any point in the lead created and a lead, you know, status changed and updates and things like this. Lead Docket will push this data out into Zapier. And then if you go into Zapier, you can see, maybe Shadae, you can pull up Zapier's, like, yeah, you have all of that. So literally, like, you can post it in Slack, you can post it in Excel, you can post it in whatever you really want. And that kind of opens up a lot of options for you guys. So Trisha, hope that answers your question there. Is you definitely can do that.
Especially for teams who are using Slack and Microsoft Teams, those are perfect examples of integrations we set up all the time, which is something happens in Lead Docket, but your whole team's not in Lead Docket. Maybe you want to send something into a Slack channel or a Teams channel to notify them that something was just added or something happened. So that's an external out of Lead Docket, to be separated and differentiated with the idea of what can go back into Lead Docket. So it's always going to be really helpful to just talk through the use case. What do you want to happen, and how often are you using it? Is it worth it? What do we need to do to set it up? Those kinds of conversations are something that you should have with either a Lead Docket person or a developer who can look at that page, read it for you, and kind of give you a good idea of is what you're looking for attainable and accessible, and what's it going to take to get you there. All right. Well, we are rounding out the hour
Covered
here.
a lot. Yeah, you covered a lot. Thank you guys for sticking through this. It's a lot of really like advanced information. So are there any other questions? We'll give a minute if there's anybody has any questions about their current integrations or things that you're currently doing in your Lead Docket, or if you are getting leads via email for whatever reason, if it's Ruby Receptionist or if it's any of your vendors and they're sending you an email with a lead, most likely there's an option for you to put that directly into Lead Docket. So if you have that going on right now, we definitely recommend as best practices would be put that into Lead Docket directly. And then we have better tracking, then you can, there's a lot of benefits in there.
Another one to keep in mind is if you're receiving referrals, depending on what systems those referral firms are using, you can send to and from each other that way as well. So if you've both got Lead Docket and you want to send into each other's Lead Dockets, there are some best practice recommendations we'll have before you set that up, but it's accessible and it's available and it looks the exact same. It goes into that opportunities box. And it doesn't have to be Lead Docket to Lead Docket. You can do that with other systems as well. There are limitations. So once again, I do recommend discussing kind of some best practices about that as well. All right. Trisha said, where can I find the API options again? So that is going to be underneath settings. And I'm going to show you on the screen. That's going to be underneath settings. And then you're going to see this explore button at the bottom. And as a reminder, that is a guide. So especially if you're just getting started in Lead Docket, I definitely recommend making sure that whoever is using that and truly reading it in depth is going to be somebody who has worked on API before. All right. Oh, we got another one. We have our website leads currently going to an email. Perfect. So most websites can send automatically into the opportunities. You're very rarely going to run into a setup where you can't. You may need to add an add-on, something to the website to do it, but more often than not, that's going to be automated. What he means when he says if it's going to an email is that if it doesn't have that ability, so if we can't skip the email or send via API, we can use Zapier oftentimes to read that email and parse that information back into Lead Docket. When I say parse, that just means read it, separate it, and put it into the fields it's supposed to go into. So more often than not, if website leads can push into opportunities without needing Zapier, but sometimes you will need it if depending on your setup. Another question, can we integrate that email with Lead Docket and be able to send emails back into the same Outlook box? I think I would want to know more about this use case, but in theory, yes, you would receive emails from your website. They would go into the opportunities box. And depending on the action that happens with that person, with that opportunity, you could, in theory, post back the result into the inbox. But you may not want to, just depending on who's being notified, what kind of actions are happening. So I think that's more a conversation about your specific workflow that should be looked at. Of course. All right. And then our email to access all of us is leaddocket@vineskills.com. So if anybody does have more specific questions and wants to reach out to us directly, we're always happy to chat. We can look at your specific situation. But other than that, are there any other questions before we jump up? I love to see the interaction.
Yeah, this is great. This is great. Thank you, Tricia, for the questions. And David, everybody, that was great. It was really good, Shadae. I think this is gonna be available, by the way, as a recording. So if you're subscribed to the webinar, you get a recording later. And we also want to again maybe point out to the Lead Docket LinkedIn group. I don't know if that is a resource for you guys for questions around Lead Docket. There is a LinkedIn group called Lead Docket that you can access and ask your questions in there as well. So that's a super helpful kind of medium. So if there's any questions or any follow-up questions, you can post them in there. That's it, right? This was helpful. I guess we answered some questions.
Yes.
That's the goal for this. And then we'll
Perfect.
see you guys next month. There's always the first Wednesday of the month. Okay.
All right. Awesome. Thanks so much, everybody.
Shadae, great job.
Bye.